G'day ladies and gentlemen, how you all doing? Scott49 here with you once again for another installment in the Warhammer 40,000 for the New Guys series. Now, in this series, we're going to be covering off on every single faction in the Warhammer 40,000 game. We'll be talking about the lore, how to best start the armies, the pros and cons of those armies, as well as the core rules for them as well, so you have an idea of how they function on the tabletop. And in today's video, we are going to be covering the Necrons and looking at the next part for them, which is the pros and the cons. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's jump into it. Alrighty everyone, so the pros and cons of the Necrons, like all the other pros and cons that we talk about for all the other factions, are to give you an idea of not only what the army is going to be like to play on the table, but also what they're going to be like to collect as an army in general. So we're going to start off with the 3 pros, then we've got the 3 cons that we'll cover as well. So the first pro is that they've got generally tough infantry. Now Necrons have got a lot of infantry units in their army that are actually quite tough to deal with. So by this, I mean, you know, there's Immortals, there's Lich Guard, there's a lot of other units like Destroyers that aren't technically infantry, but they are toughness like 5, so they're really sturdy. And so it's this combination of toughness, wounds, or saves with also the reanimation protocols rule for them that we'll cover up in the core rules video that can make Necrons quite hard to deal with if your opponent isn't committing enough firepower to just deal with an entire unit at a time rather than just picking off a little bit of each. It's not going to help them as much as dealing with one entire unit at once. Now, pro number 2 for the Necrons is they're great in close combat. Now, they've got several good options within their army that they're able to utilize that have great close combat potential. These close combat units are generally quite speedy on the table. They've got quite high movement, and because they're dedicated close combat units, you're able to use an advanced move for them, unless you're wanting to charge that turn, of course, to be able to get them up the field nice and quickly because they don't have any shooting. And they're able to pump out a decent number of attacks with a decent strength as well, with a solid AP value and damage on their weapon profiles also. So it means that you're going to be able to do some significant damage once these units do get into close combat. And units that you could include in this categories are ones such as the Scorpek and Ophidian Destroyers, Flayed ones, Canoptic Wraiths, and Lich Guard, just to name a few. And they're going to be really good to field, and a lot of them are relatively cheap as well, so you can actually take multiple close combat threats in the army to really give a threat saturation overload to your opponent if you wish to do so. So the third pro is they have good options in most battlefield roles. Now, the Necrons have got a great selection of units just across the board in terms of their codex, but most of the battlefield roles have got a lot of different options that you can choose from. Now, the HQ choices, for example, have got a good variety of strong close combat characters, as well as strong buffing characters as well, like your Cryptex, that, you know, you've got your Technomancer, your Chronomancer, your Plasmancer, and your Psychomancer. You've also got Overlords that can go on Catacomb Command Barges, the Scorpek Destroyer Lord, the name characters. You've also got the Standard Lord as well, that you can have a decent combo when you do the Overlord and the Necron Lord together to get hitting on 2s with the unit rerolling 1s. Pretty strong for their buffing ability there as well. Now, in both the Elite and Fast Attack slots, you have a great selection of close combat units. In Elites, you've also got the powerful Satan Shards of the Nightbringer, the Void Dragon, the Deceiver, and Transcendent Satans as well, to bring some powerful abilities to bear. But then you've also got a lot of key utility units like the Canoptic Reanimator, or a myriad of other options to do certain roles you may need within an army. So say Scarab Swarms, you can take those to be backfield objective holders, things like that, and they're relatively cheap. You know, you've got to really consider these type of units and what functions they're going to be able to best perform to help your army win your games. And in heavy support and flyers, they've got a strong variety of units that provide all manner of ranged firepower to help bolster your army as they go into close combat. Units like the Doom Scythe, the Doomsday Ark, the Annihilation Barge, a lot of relatively strong vehicles there, as well as destroyers and heavy destroyers to give you some more stronger anti-infantry shooting there as well if you wish to take them. Now that covers it for the 3 pros of the Necron army. Now we're going to jump into the 3 cons of the army as to reasons why you might not be interested in collecting Necrons, in my personal opinion. So the first con is they do unfortunately lack a good variety of ranged weaponry. Now, as I've just said, they do have strong shooting in the heavy support slot and the flyers, but really outside of that, they don't have too much strong shooting, with having very few options for ranged weapons across the board outside of your heavy support and your flyers, which means that that battlefield role is going to be quite clogged up with units that you're wanting to take, and you're going to have to choose what you want quite wisely to get the most value out of them for taking firepower. Other than that, you may have immortals or warriors in the troops that can do some anti-infantry stuff, but maybe it's a weight of fire option rather than the quality of fire. And there's a couple of other units like Death Marks, for example, are quite good character killers, but at the same time, it's, you know, they're quite lacking in a lot of mass anti-infantry and mass anti-tank firepower that you can get for decent expenditure in terms of your points. Now, the second con for Necrons is unfortunately there's only 2 different troop choices. And whilst Necrons have got a great variety in all the other battlefield roles that I've just touched on, unfortunately, troops is not one of them. The 2 different options that you have to choose from for troops is Necron Warriors and Necron Immortals. And more often than not, in games you'll see Immortals taken more than Warriors for a number of different reasons. It allows you to get more units on the battlefield outside of troops. It also has a smaller unit size and smaller unit footprint, so it means you can take a 5-man instead of having to take a 10-man warrior squad at base for 130 points. The Immortals are 80 points for the 5-man unit, so you're saving about 50 points there to be able to field other units. So there are a couple of reasons why you'll see Immortals more than Warriors, and unfortunately they're your only 2 options for your troop choices. And number 3 is that despite appearances, they've actually got a high cost of entry. Now, outside of the starter set options of the Recruit, Elite, and Command editions, as well as the Combat Patrol, which do cover a lot of the Necron units, overall, they are actually quite an expensive army to collect. This is purely down to a lot of the newer kits that have got a decent price increases compared to their old ones, such as Scorpec and Ophidian Destroyers. For 3 of those, you're paying $90 Australian, for example. Flayed ones for 5 is 84 Australian. Necron Warriors for 10 in a box with 3 Scarab Swarms, $77 Australian. The Void Dragons, $180 odd dollars. The Silent King is up in the 200s. The new Monolith as well is up there in the 180 to 200 plus range. So for these bigger units that you're wanting to take, it can be quite expensive to pick those up to keep on going with the army. However, if you're actually interested in picking up any of the units that are contained within the Combat Patrol or the Recruit or Elite or Command editions, then it's probably actually a bit cheaper for you to pick up those sets rather than just cherry picking those units out in the long run, because you'll actually end up getting more bang for your buck from these options. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the starting the army options as we'll explore those options for starting a Necron army. But ladies and gentlemen, that covers it for my top 3 pros and my top 3 cons of why you should or should not play Necrons. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, well, I hope that you have enjoyed this video where we've been talking about the pros and cons of collecting Necrons. Now, if you do have any thoughts or different opinions, feel free to let me know down in the comment section below. I always love talking through the different reasons why an army's good or why an army's bad to pick up, and feel free to let me know down in those comment sections. And if you did enjoy this video, feel free to hit that like, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, turn that notification bell on so you're able to know when we keep on releasing more videos in this series, because we're only just getting started. We've got so many more factions to cover, and I'm loving digging into this content, the lore, and giving you guys a great foundation for starting all the various factions for the game. Now, if you do have any questions but you don't want to ask me here on YouTube, that's alright. Feel free to come and find me when I'm live over on Twitch on Tuesday and Friday nights and Saturday afternoons, Australian Eastern Standard Time, where we do hobby sessions, live games, and tournament coverage as well for events that I travel to across Australia. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch up in the next video.